And what I've found, at least, is that I've managed to satisfy much of my curiosities, not doing it myself, but doing it with others.
So today's visit is in the living space, working space of Andrew Gryf Paterson, who comes from Scotland.
Originally,
Yeah, but you've been living here for a long time.
I have been living half my life in Scotland, or within that 2 years in England, and the rest of it I've been based here. Imagine that. So half my life now has been living in Helsinki, or having an address in Helsinki. That's fairer to say.
You travel a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and I've also spent, in that period of being based in Helsinki, I've spent quite a lot of time somewhere else. So actually I was thinking recently that the place where I am now, where you're visiting now, in West Helsinki, I've been living here now 6 years, a bit over 6 years and 3 months now. And it's actually the longest I've lived anywhere since my childhood home.
Wow.
Which is quite something.
It is.
And I knew for a while that Helsinki was the place where I've sort of lived the longest now. But of course in Helsinki I've had maybe 3 different lives. Maybe 4 lives if you include the period when I didn't have an apartment here, but had an address here. And was coming and going. So maybe I've had 4 lives, and this is like my 4th Helsinki life.
Like a cat.
Maybe. And I'm wondering how many lives in Helsinki I'm going to have. But at least this one's been the longest in one place. And where you've came to visit me today is on a small bit of land called Tarvo Island, Tarvo and Saari. And it's near to Gallen-Kallela Museum, which you walk past, which is Tarvaspa, and this is quite well known as a location in East Espoo. And it's a little bit to the west of Vanhan Munkiniemi. So actually, the Munkiniemi neighbourhood is my nearest neighbourhood.
But it isn't considered part of Munkiniemi, or is it?
It's a good question. Maybe we're in some sort of autonomous zone in the middle. I'm not sure.
No man's land.
Maybe. Well, it's not no man's land because I'm living here on this bit of land. There's 2 villas. We're all tenants, so none of us own either the villas or the land. It's a public city-owned island, and then the 2 villas which are on this island used to be owned by the city, and they were given out to tenure for renovation in the end of the 2000s, and the current landlord lady, they've had this place rented out since 2012, and currently in this house there's 10 people, so I live with 9 others, and this studio which you came to visit is like the only one which is a sort of self-contained sort of kitchen studio. In English we might call it a bed sit, where you've got the bed, the kitchen, the toilet, and that's it. And the living room is part of that, and for me I've made it also my workspace and a semi-public space, which we'll talk about hopefully.
For sure.
But there's the other villa on this island has 4 adults and a child. So in total, the population of this bit of land is like 14 and a bit, 15 of course, if you include the kid. And there's a lot of nature here. The island is sort of how protected as a small nature island, and there's a lot of passers-by. There's a main walking and cycling route goes over this land, and also at the north tip of the land there's an expressway through Vaula, so the main expressway going westwards out of Helsinki. So actually there's a lot of bypassers on this bit of land, and there's a lot of visitors to this land, mostly people who just pass over it. but there's only like 15 humans live here, which is quite cool, right? It's a very micro neighborhood.
Yeah, it's like a proper communal
Sort of.
living.
Yeah, I mean, it is what you make it, right? So it's not necessarily communal unless you make it communal. You don't necessarily know your neighbor unless you make effort to get to know your neighbors.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky.
And also the neighbor has to want to get to know.
Also true. When I have been living here, and it's now over 6 years, I've made quite a lot of effort to get to know my neighbours because I can actually see them out my window. Right, so the other villa is across the path, and I can see the other villa, and that helps because it means that because I sit and work at my desk and I look out the window, and sometimes I can see my neighbours, or I can see the people who pass by, or I can see the whatever utility trucks come or whatever. So this location in this villa, which is over 100 years old, is one of the best rooms anyway in the house to see who passes by. And that makes it by default a little bit more social than others, you know. And then anyway, I, as you mentioned, I come from Scotland, and we try to make an effort to be hospitable and make an effort to get to know our neighbours. And maybe, obviously, I'm not typical as a resident of Helsinki, so I actually do care about knowing my neighbours, and so I make that effort.
Yeah, and I guess that has always been for you the case, because also your practice, let's say, which we will talk about, because I was struggling a little bit how to define exactly. You are an artist originally, but you are doing so many things that it's...
Yeah, well, okay.
But it's always been this kind of a social...
Yeah, well, the social side of things has been part of my working life since 1999. So over 25 years. And I was trained as visual artist in graphic arts, printmaking, fine art printmaking in Glasgow School of Art. And what I liked about that was that it was a workshop practice. So you were always anyway making your art in the company of others. You weren't necessarily doing your artwork with others, but you were in the company of others, right? So it was always socialized.
You know, but not everybody has like a printing press. So
no, absolutely. But it's not a studio practice in the same as some others, right, in fine art. And then the other side of things is that I became interested in club culture, so I was also interested in making visuals for clubs when I still lived in Glasgow. And then I went to Finland in the end for 5 months in 1998. And I was very lucky. I was a guest of a printmaking centre in Jyväskylä, Grafiikkakeskus there in Jyväskylä. And they had a little residency room, and I got a scholarship, luckily, from the UK, and I spent time there. And I was invited to make an exhibition, right? Because I was doing something a bit weird at the time, which was making prints and scanning them into the computer and doing digital imaging, and then trying to make
revolutionary
and trying to make animations from them, right?
Yeah.
So, but they were animations for clubs, so imagine little video loops, right?
Yeah.
So it was quite unusual, to be fair, and so the curator of the centre said, "Hey, Andrew, maybe you would like to actually stay longer and make an exhibition." And it was actually my first and actually only solo exhibition, right? In 1998, December 1998. And at the time, actually, I got to know some local musicians, and they played live at the opening. And they had this weird electroacoustic music, like nice ambient stuff, but it worked really well with video loops, right? And animation loops. And it sort of gave that musical environment to the visual artwork. And I vowed afterwards that I'm going to always try to do things with others in the future. So already like 99, when I get back to Scotland, I was like, right, I don't want to do solo work. I want to do social work. And I moved back to my home area. I didn't have an apartment in Glasgow. I'd given it up to go to Finland. So I moved back to my home area, to where my parents were living. And I spent maybe a year between Glasgow and this area called Clipmanager in central Scotland. And the bigger town in that area called Alloa It's very a small community. It's like the whole municipality has about 50,000 people then in the late 90s. And it's also an area which has quite a lot of deprivation. It's very post-industrial. It was famous in the past for coal mining and textile mills and brewery industry, and there's still glassworks, to be fair, but almost all the industries that used to exist there are now over. And it's quite a small, rural, post-industrial small town area. So it meant that actually the social services were quite strong, because that was actually, they were the main employer. The local council and their social services was the main employer left. And they had a daycare centre for adults with learning disabilities or communication issues, or what you would now call neuroatypicality or something like this. And I started to volunteer there. And they had a very curious multi-sensory room. And I got my first experience of doing so-called community arts. And because of that, I got invited by the local council's art development officer, the one who commissions artists to work with people, to do a work with teenagers who had social behavioural issues. There was a special support school. And so I did digital imaging with teenagers. And then later I did a workshop with adults with mental health issues. Okay, I was actually struggling myself at that time, so it was very complicated type of work to do, with no budget, with no software necessarily, with freeware as it was then in the late 90s. So like I got very quickly into experience of doing digital imaging with people as community arts. And so when I eventually came to Finland after a master degree in computer graphics, 3D graphics, I had a bit of experience of doing virtual environments with teenagers as a community arts workshop, or digital imaging with teenagers in northeast England. So when I came to Finland in 2002, end of 2002, I had a profile which was community arts plus digital arts, which was quite unusual, and maybe some of the experience I had at the time was quite unusual. And there wasn't many people doing that type of thing, for sure. But when I came to the Media Lab in Helsinki, then it was University of Art and Design, I had this background of doing sort of social work. So experimenting with new technologies, mobile technologies for me, at that point, it meant that it was quite easy to do things with people. And actually experimenting with new technologies and new media interfaces and making workshops was actually what I knew. And it was very easy to slip into the idea of social engaged arts, or not just community arts where you get commissioned often to do that type of work, but you decide that your practice as an artist is working with other people and maybe exploring new media or new network cultures or online publishing, which was what I was doing in the mid-2000s. It became a practice which blurred already into social engaged arts, and what some people, of course, nowadays just call social practice.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's a bit more common, but I don't know, actually. I mean, I have the feeling that before it was not something many people would go into.
Well, I mean, certainly there was like, there has been since the 90s, the relational aesthetics in contemporary art practice, quite famously known, where artists would make social events as occasions to do something together, to be together, to experience something together, and that was the artwork. But that was done within the framework of contemporary arts, and maybe even gallery art institutions. And what I was doing when I came to Helsinki was get involved with media art festivals like Pixel Lake Festival, where the experimenting with new technologies and the making of workshops and inviting people to take part in messing around with some new or emerging practices was something which was quite natural to me because of that community arts background. And then because it wasn't necessarily within contemporary art practice, it was within media arts and network culture and festival format, it meant that actually we were quite free to do whatever. And it was quite easy to do that. And it was only really when I met particularly Danish artists who had a social engaged art practice in mid-2000s that I started to think, oh yeah, there is something in contemporary arts which is this as well. And there's this history of this also, which is not just community arts. It's like the artist deciding for themselves to work with people. And that was where it sort of merged together a bit. And I gained a new discourse, I suppose. I also learned about social design, or social engaged design, and social design, where you think about how designing for interfaces that don't exist yet, or promoting new interfaces. So it was actually this hybrid mix that I got involved in. And it just happened that by like 2006, for example, 7, I totally abandoned mediated practice for a while at least, and started to do things in public space or work with grassroots communities, and still maybe sometimes in festival formats, but not necessarily so. And that's where things started to become a little bit more about a social activism or a cultural activism that wasn't necessarily taking place in a festival, and definitely wasn't taking place in galleries. So I've been used to being outside of gallery spaces for most of the 25 years since the turn of 2000s, right? And that's been quite natural for me. And it's meant I've had to do social arts, let's say, in other spaces, in other ways.
Do you ever miss doing some art just for yourself?
Well, of course I have some things just for myself. Creative writing is just for myself. Most of the writing I've done also as an academic or researcher has mostly been myself. The things that I throw around to the internet in social media is myself mostly. So there's enough in what I do that satisfies my interests. Do I want to go back to doing artwork on my own? I don't care too much. I mean, I can do it, of course, if it's necessary, if it serves a function, if it suits the purpose or the cause, but it's not necessary. I actually quite like working with people. You know.
Well, when is that type of art actually ever necessary? Like, is it?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I think activism, you might argue,
activism
needs a visualized communication sometimes. But when it comes to doing artwork, well, this is a good debate. What's worth doing?
Yeah, I guess there's two main sides of it.
And what's worth doing?
Depends on the person.
Do you satisfy your creative interests and curiosities anyway? And what I've found, at least, is that I've managed to satisfy much of my curiosities, not doing it myself, but doing it with others. And actually, the discourse of do it yourself, do it with others, do it anyway, whatever, is this sort of realm of creative practice I'm involved with anyway, and where I get inspiration from, and where I have some heritage from, and where I found my collaborators and community from. So actually those influences in creativity and curiosity have been more important than mainstream contemporary art.
I mean, from what you say, it seems like Finland is what pushed you kind of towards that direction.
Are we recording already?
Yes, we are.
Cool. Actually, the curious thing is that the activity that I've been doing here has not just been here. So Helsinki, has been the main place I've lived and main place where I've worked to some degree. The very important complement to this has been Latvia. So since 2003 onwards, so the first year I lived in Helsinki, I've been going to Latvia too. And actually the activities I've had in Latvia have been a little bit more ethnographically interested, right? Or cultural heritage interested. And also I'm a different person in some way there, because I came to Helsinki to do doctoral studies, to be in a university. I got involved in a media arts festival, Pixel Lake. I got to know, of course, the local art scene. But when I went to Latvia, I also got to know another media arts context in Riga through Riksi.
How did you end up in Latvia?
Because of Riks's Centre for New Media Culture in Riga. And Riks is one of the best, it had their own electronic arts lab in the 90s. It was one of the most established and experienced media arts organisation in this side of Europe, and maybe one of the best in Europe even, in creating interdisciplinary, even transdisciplinary subjects between art and communication, which was the name of their festival in those days, or in the idea of sort of renewable arts and technologies, and maybe a future vision of where these things might all overlap. They promoted also terms like techno-ecologies and things like this. So actually, the Riga context, and then also the Liepaja context in the west coast of Latvia, offered me other places which had other histories and complexities that the Finnish art scene and university scene didn't have. And so I was very much always going between these places for years, and still am actually. And the Baltic states have been really important to me, especially in interdisciplinary arts, especially in media arts. And so if I lived here, I was also on some years half there, mentally if not physically, and that's been very important too. Well, what that brought was an interest in art and science, as later bioart science did. It also brought an interest in cultural heritage, intangible cultural heritage, things which are related to the cultures that are in other forms than art practice. You know, traditional knowledge, for example, or handicraft, or things like that. So I've always had other influences than just what I've had and gained here.
Yeah.
What's funny, I suppose, because it goes back to your question, is that Finland and Latvia are two really hard places to do social engaged practice. Because
Latvia also like Finland in that.
Oh yeah, maybe even harder.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's like a real effort to get people to do things sometimes with you, or to share things with you, because the reservation that's natural in the peoples, because of the histories that they have had and experienced and suffered from, has meant that being an outsider or even a visitor doesn't necessarily have positive connotations. And a lot of work has to be done to build up trust, or hospitality, of course, is there, like all peoples have, but still there's a reservation. So to do things in the so-called participatory way or collaborative way can be an effort. So
well, maybe that's why it's interesting to you, because it's also a challenge.
Absolutely, I think you're right. I mean, I think that
if it was too easy, it wouldn't be so interesting.
Yeah, and maybe because I come from a culture which is very social. I think Scottish culture is rather social culture, at least the central belt, central Scottish part of it is a much more outgoing, extroverted culture than maybe what we experience here in Finland, or what I've experienced in some of the aspects of the Baltic states. Then the effort is necessary, but that's also a motivator and an encourager in some ways. And it's a challenge for sure. I think all of us who come from somewhere else and live in another place, so any immigrant cultural worker, has an effort to make.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, there is something you give, right, by being there, that maybe is not locally present. And I like to think that the tradition of a sort of Scottish hospitality or outgoingness in working with others, or the socialness by default almost, is something that I bring to the local scenes. And maybe that's made it easier. Of course, English language helps. I mean, being native English speaker has helped me, obviously, to cross these boundaries around the Baltic seas.
Yeah, I think so.
Because English language is the sort of lingua franca of the area. That is the language in common.
Yeah.
So it's of course to my advantage, and I'm sure I've taken advantage of it. But being a little bit more socially outgoing than the locals helps, I think, too. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is probably the positive direction you can go in such a situation if you are very social and then you come to a place which is not. You either, make your way through that or get very depressed. So it's good that you took like the positive things.
The other forms have happened over the years. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, and like for sure there's been periods where you run out of energy and you feel exhausted and you have a sense of burnout from these processes, because I say this every so often, and certainly to some new people who come to Finland, but I think it applies to the region, that if you do put out a lot of energy and you don't feel like you get much back socially, then that energy exchange is eventually can drain you, because you might not get back as much as you put out. And of course, as an immigrant, you have to anyway put out more all the time. And so whatever way you put out more is going to, of course, take something from you. And if that's socially, then that's going to take that from you. And I've found over the years that I definitely run out of energy. And one of the solutions maybe to that has been, of course, going abroad and getting some energy somewhere else and bringing it back. So my nomadicity or my travels over the years have replenished me. Some places more than others, yeah. But like it's been necessary to go away and come back.
Yeah, I can.
To survive and to keep going, basically,
Why do you keep coming back?
It's a good question. Well, there's many wonderful things about Finnish society and Finnish culture and the nature that exists here. So there is this side which I always come back to. As you know, like when you make Finnish friends, you also can have very good friends, and this is something that is rare and is valuable, and I think there's a honesty in friendship here which is fantastic and worth to be here for. Some people might disagree with this, and of course it all depends on how self-reliant and stoic you might be to get to that stage.
How stubborn?
How stubborn you are, etc. Right? But anyway, I've at least had enough of that to manage it. And don't get me wrong, I think over the 20 odd years I've been having an address here, there's a number of times I think I wanted to leave, right? And I have left, and then I come back again later. So obviously there's a stability here which has been good, despite maybe the challenges of occasionally being homeless, or often being unemployed, or being poor in a society which actually costs quite a lot in some things. But then on other levels, well, relatively speaking, we forget this, but actually it can be cheaper to live here than some other places when you add together all your bills. So there is some things which are definitely worth it. And I've kept coming back also because I've been a very enduring doctoral candidate. I came here to do doctoral studies, and I'm still here because it's not finished. And that's made me stay here and come back also to finish. So like I'm at that end process. But because the Finnish doctoral studies as an artist or as a designer, but I think it's harder as an artist because there's no obvious income that comes from that practice. It can be hard to do doctoral studies here because you're competing all the time for funding. There's no obvious research group to be part of. So actually it can be tough. And most people don't know this, but well, the ones who live here do. But you don't get funding because you're a doctoral candidate in a Finnish university, and especially in art and design. So it means that
I think they have some spots that are
yes,
funded, but those are
better over the years.
That's like some gems.
Yes, it's got better over the years. But I can tell you, 20 years ago there was even less. So like it's a tough thing to do. And I've found that, of course, I have survived. I've done a lot of freelance work, a lot of cultural production work, whether it's as a producer or as a curator or sometimes as an educator. Of course, I've managed to get work. You don't get to be unemployed unless you've paid your taxes. So I mean, there is this, right? But that is very hard to sustain also a research career and to be a researcher. So the ones who get the salaried cultural foundation money are the ones who can manage to do that. And if you don't, then you struggle to keep going. And I've been lucky that I've had an international practice, so it means that I do work other places, and people do thankfully occasionally invite me to do things in other places. So it means I've been able to come and go and keep the base, you know. Yeah. I did come back here in spring 2019 because of Brexit.
Oh.
And I maybe wouldn't have came back if it wasn't there, because I was already living between France, Germany and other places, Latvia, and coming back to Finland on occasions. So actually Brexit made me move back because it was the only place in the European Union I had already permanent residence. And so that meant I re-established my base in Finland again after like 3 or 4 years of being very nomadic. And if that didn't happen, I might not have came back. But of course, the shadow of a doctoral thesis still sort of haunting me meant I came back for that too. Yeah, of course, if I was an EU citizen still and not rooted to Finland and only being able to live and work here or pay taxes here, which means that you can go and work somewhere else, but your taxes have to pay here. It's not so easy, just like any other non-European Union citizen, to go and live in another country unless someone employs you and gives you a work visa.
Right. Yeah.
That is a limitation. But the lucky thing is that I have such a good network in the region that that's not such a problem. If I went to another country, it would be a problem. You'd have to start again.
Yeah.
Right. So I have that experience also. And it reminds you of how in social engaged practice, in network cultural practice, your social connections and your network connections, no surprise, is your most valuable asset. And like where you decide to do your work is that base that allows you to use all those networks and those connections and go from and to and from that place. So that's my case. And that means that you're not necessarily working for a particular gallery. You might be working with a bunch of associations, but you're not in the gallery circuit, you're not in the art biennale circuit. It's a lot based on your own connections.
Yeah, I mean, I think even people who are more in a gallery circle, it's still all about their connections there.
It is. It depends on whether you're in a market or not, right? Because of course you can have a representative. You can have a space which gives you that space on a regular basis.
There are very
A
few
gallery.
of those, though.
Oh, in Helsinki, yes. You're right. And you know it because your practice is anyway more art object making, as far as I understand. And I have other friends who make more traditional art works that do need white cubes to show them.
Yeah.
And that does create obviously it's another economy of creative practice. It means you need to find the money to rent a gallery. You need to maybe even sit there in the gallery for the time of your show.
Yeah.
Or if you're lucky, someone commissions you to do it. Or if you're even luckier, you've got a grant, salary, foundation money, whatever, to do it. And then you can book a gallery or a time or whatever. But if you don't do work like that, then there is none of that focal point to make in an exhibition. And everything you have to somehow work around associations like festivals or self-organized events, so that actually there's something that focuses your attention or your energy into, something that someone else might experience. Can be a social event, of course.
So you started with Pixelake? festival?
That was the first community I got to know here beyond the university, beyond Media Lab, University of Art and Design. So Pixel Lake Festival was a fantastically young community when I first got to know it. It followed another media arts festival called Avanto Festival, which still went on parallel for some years. And there was already in the late 90s and early 2000s a lot of exchange between the Baltic states and the Nordic states, the capital cities. And so there was already a network of people and organizations, associations around media art culture, which tried to meet or did meet regularly. And Pixel Lake started in 2002 as a very small event. I don't know, maybe there was 30 or 50 people. There was a budget of a couple of €100. And I have only seen the pictures of it because I moved at the end of that year. So the next year, 2003, that was the year I started to get to know Latvians. And some Latvians came to Pixel Lake Festival, and there was an exchange even between these festivals, Art Communication Festival that Rixa made in Riga and Pixel Lake in Helsinki, and I went to both that year. They were in the similar springtime, and that started off a relationship on both parts, both in Riga and in Helsinki. And later in the year of 2003, the Latvians at Rixa said, we would like you to be part of some European cultural program that we are applying for. Could you be the Finnish representative of this network application? I didn't know anything about Nordic cultural funding at that time, so I said, yeah, sure. And I became introduced to Pixel Lake that way. And I realized it was a great bunch of people and really interesting works. Interesting international network, because already Pixel Lake had started that international forum even a few years after they existed, even the second year that they existed. And so all of a sudden I was sort of dropped into one of the most interesting media arts festival of the Nordic region, and I stayed involved. And
you were there in the organization part of it since the beginning, or did you take part as an artist?
In that 2004, I organized a workshop, and it was the first workshop I organized at that scale. It was stress, for sure. I benefited a lot from my colleagues and their experience, especially Sophia Lerner. So in some ways, it was a great way to get to know the festival by basically inviting to organize with someone else's money. Right? It was a great way to start. And yeah, I continued. Actually, in the first years, I did something every second year. And in between years, I sort of hung around and joined some activities. And it was only really in 2008, 2009 that I started to do something every year. And I made a few bigger events and got closer and closer. And then actually between 2011 and 2014, I was very active in Pixel Lake more than any other place, because I ran around the year informal education program. And so there was events not just in the festival, but around the year. And I did this for 4 years in a row. 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah. So I actually, and that was a part-time salary. I mean, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week in the last year. But of course it took up all my time. As it does, you know. So like, yeah, that ended 2014 when I moved to France and with family to France, and I started to move back north again 6 months later. But that's another story. So like, yeah, I mean, there was a period where Pixel Lake was one of the main organizational associations that I was involved with, as I was at the same time with Latvians in Rixa. The practice internationalized. When I moved back here, more stable in Helsinki in 2019, that was around the time when I moved into this place. So where we meet today has been the starting point of this sort of, I don't know, fourth life. So there was a nomadic third life, there was a family second life, and there was a solo first life, right? When I became as a doctoral candidate at first. The nomadic third life meant that I was coming and going, but stated friends didn't have a place. So when I moved here for the fourth life, actually I created a base for myself again, which was my own, right? And what you see here actually in this studio space is the accumulation of all this 20 years plus experience.
Yeah, let's talk about this space now, because it's
So this is
back to this current moment.
Yeah, sure. So this is like a 20 square meter square room. There is, as you can see throughout this conversation, there's a kitchen wall. So this is the kitchen side. What you can't see on the opposite side is like the book side, the library side.
They will see the book side also.
Okay, right. So the books and the kitchen, they face each other.
Yeah.
And like I should say that in the nomadic years,
and then they take about the same
size. They take up the whole wall on both sides. In the nomadic years, I started to do a lot of kitchen oriented arts practice. You know, like in participatory arts, food is like the most common denominator. So you can always get people to participate in food. Like there's no matter where from these persons are, no matter how intellectualized they are, you can always do something together with food. So it's a good starting point. And some cultural heritage practices like fermentation, or like let's say particular food cultures anyway, they come from a particular place. Some of them are transnational, some of them are very local, but you can use those traditions as a way to do things together, right? So I have done that in my artwork, let's say, as in my social practice. I have used food cultures as a way to do things together. And when I decided I wanted to set up some sort of base for myself again in Helsinki, I thought, okay, I have the studio, it has a kitchen. The cool thing is that it has a door to the public's
It has its
pathway.
own outside door, yeah.
I don't need to have anyone visit me by going through the common door with my other housemates using. So people can come here autonomously without affecting the rest of the house. And at the time, the neighbour across the pathway, Ritu Kokkola, she used to have a sort of education centre for handicrafts. And she made workshops there in the summer. I thought I could do the same. I could do workshops in this space around, for example, fermentation, around other food traditions that, you know, people don't maybe know how to do it. They come and they do it together and they go home a little bit happier, a little more knowledgeable, etc.
And a full stomach.
And maybe a full stomach. And this is, I mean, already when I spent time living in other places, I had explored the idea of a kitchen lab, which is not a unique term, it's a very common term. But the idea, of course, that a kitchen and the social space around it can be an experimental space, a place where you experiment with making, maybe a space where you experiment in what you do in a kitchen. And I thought, okay, I could make a kitchen lab out of this. I can make workshops here. We can invite people to come in through this door. There's a toilet. There's no need to interfere with other parts of the house. It's perfect. And to be honest, 2019, when this idea sort of crystallized, when I moved into this place, I thought, oh, great. And of course, as we all know, by the time February, March 2020 came along, there was no participatory events anywhere. Yeah. And inviting people to your home was not going to happen so easily.
Yeah, how did you go through the COVID period?
Well, I lived together with other people in this house and we took care of each other. So if someone got sick, we helped them. If someone had to be quarantined, they were quarantined, etc. So we managed. It was quite useful, quite good. I mentioned earlier that there was even a Helsingin Sanomat article, journalist and photographer come to find out how a big commune survives in the COVID period. Well, we did. Actually, it was probably the best case scenario. In my case, I had my own living space, own toilet, own kitchen, own room, own door. And at the same time, I have 9 other housemates.
Okay.
And we live on a little island that's quite remote from other parts of the city. I mean, in some ways, it was perfect. You had the nature, you had the social space.
That's true, yeah.
You had your own space. When the pandemic was over, then I started to think, now is a good time to do this type of things. And in December 2022, I started this Kitchen Lab Darvo process, which is
how it's called now.
Which is what this space is called online, at least. And there have been 2023. There was a 6-month program of events where I basically tested what could I do here, and what type of things could I do with what I've got. And I have to say that during the pandemic, from 2020 to especially June 2021, I also initiated and co-directed a large-scale festival version of Pixel Lake.
Which is where we met.
This is where we met
for the first time.
Exactly. And that was at Oodi, Keskos Kirasto, and we thought
the Central Library.
Yes, Central Library, where we thought we would have fantastic participatory, multidisciplinary festival. And in the end, we had a radio festival and a rather limited site-specific festival, which almost no one came to because it was at the end of the pandemic period.
Yeah, it was still kind of COVID times, so
people
were still a bit reluctant to go out.
No one had got used to the idea of being and doing anything together.
No.
And so it was really challenging, and for most, even though our festival was themed burn, and when I authored this concept of the theme, I purposely didn't want to use the word burnout, maybe burning or something else, and it was always blank, so that it could be burnout, but let's hope not, right? Let's hope it's something else. Let's think of the positive side. And of course,
funny, I never even connected that title to burnout.
Yeah, well, the point was to avoid that, right? The irony was, of course, the challenge of making this festival during a pandemic with over 100 participants meant that, of course, all of us were exhausted afterwards. And I also thought afterward, it took all of us a long time to recover. Producer more than others. As someone who initiated that process, felt responsible for it, of course it was quite a heavy weight. And I reflected a lot afterwards. What sort of events do I want to do afterwards this? Because that was too much. Right? It was too much anyway as a festival. It was an 8-day festival. It had both radio program for 8 days plus site-specific program for 8 days. It was too much. And we suffered because of it. We made some bad choices. I made some bad choices about scale, about this unknown aspect, like what was going to happen, and trying to stay open-minded to what might happen or could happen, meant that we just kept everything rather than cut. And of course, at the time, we also had a feeling that we wanted to create something hopeful, optimistic to look forward to. So we didn't want to cut people out of program either. So we tried to keep as much in as possible. Of course, it was a disaster for our health because it was too much to manage. But afterwards, I thought, okay, I'm not making a huge festival like this again. I've already done, I don't know how, 18 years of Pixel Lake organizing. I don't need to do big festivals anymore. So I started to think, okay, maybe I make not festivals anymore, but small scale events at a threshold point which is manageable. So if that experience of 2021 Festival Burn was that it was so much that you can burn out even when you tried your best not to, that threshold level of effort put out to what you get back a little bit like our discussion earlier about what you put out as an immigrant into a new culture and what you get back in this cultural exchange, the energy exchange of doing anything. That point of putting out, it showed you how little you got back during pandemic as a cultural worker, right? Yeah. Because it was all remote, or mostly remote. And the energy exchange which happens by doing things together in presence, mostly, but even remotely...
It's not even comparable,
yeah,
I would say.
But even remotely, you can get energy back from remote cultural events, right? You can get inspired by content, etc. And you can feel it in that mediation. Yeah. I think we all have this experience now. But when you make a huge physical effort to do things on a particular site and you don't get anything back, it was a real lesson about what you put out and what you get back, right? And I thought, okay, better to do cultural events at a very low threshold point of effort. So that what you put out, even if you don't get the back, only one person turns up. That's okay, right? And where's the best place to do that? At home, right? So if you could make a cultural program and an event series and culture practice in general, a social engaged practice in general, from your own home, then well, if it doesn't work out, or if no one comes, or it doesn't meet your expectation, then not a lot is lost, energy-wise.
You're home anyway.
Yeah, you're home anyway, right? So I started to think, what can I do with this situation? Okay, I can make sauna. We can read books. We can do food things. This 20 square meters can only hold about 20 people anyway. We tried to do some screening events, for example. We managed to get like 15 people plus in this room watching films here. Projector here to bookshelves there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do a small-scale screening event without too much effort. And if enough people come, you go, great. If one person comes, you go, all right, that's cool, we'll do it anyway. Because you're here now, right? And I mean, also, the location we talk about here. To get here, it's almost 2 kilometers to nearest bus or tram.
It's a bit of an effort.
It's a bit of a walk,
it's
right?
A hike, yeah.
So there is this challenge with this location. It's out of the way. As you know, most of cultural activity in Helsinki nowadays, if it's not happening in the center, it's happening eastwards. So to come out far west is like the opposite direction. And one of its biggest weak points as a cultural space, as a semi-public cultural space, is that it's out of the way. But if you can get people to come here, it's quite nice to be here. The nature is quite nice around. You can go for a walk around the island. I can offer you tea. We can do other things, right? So it can be hospitable and worth the effort. I don't know what the time is like, but let me say that in that pilot year, I also started to practice with online radio. And the Pixel Lake Festival 2021, of making a whole festival with radio, meant that I had some experience and some idea what type of content you might be able to do, at least live or pre-recorded or a mix of both. So it meant that even if you cannot get here, you can still do activity here and broadcast it to an audience. Right? And also with radio, you don't know who's listening, right? So if no one's there, then you don't know. If someone is there, great. But it makes no difference to what you're doing here.
Yeah.
So actually just do it anyway.
So is this what you like about this place the most?
I think what I like about this is that the threshold is low to do culture, right? That you can invent. I mean, all of us as artists, we have all made an effort to invent our own culture through what we do, right? So whether it's painting, whether it's printmaking, whether it's digital arts or performance or social engaged arts, we have all made an effort to make our own culture with their own little signature of some kind, right? So like if you've made that effort anyway, you've done it for a few years, you've done it for 10 years or more, then the most important thing is you do it, right? You just have to keep doing it regardless, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't give up, right? So this is the point. If you thought like this, you decide, I'm not going to give up, I'm going to keep doing it anyway. It's like in which conditions is valuable to you. And if you put your threshold low for cultural events, say, I'm going to do it at home. And I'm going to invite people to my home to do it. And if someone comes, great. If no one comes, well, it's a pity. If no one comes for 3 or 4 times when you do it, of course you're like, should I keep doing this or not? Have I planned this the wrong way? Or am I doing this in a way that's attractive to anyone else but me? Right? You have to, of course, reflect and question yourself. But if the thing that you're offering is hospitality and tea and food and sauna and something else, then it's a nice exchange going on.
And how does it feel to, especially here in Finland, where the person's home is very kind of almost sacred to themselves?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It's such a cocoon. And there you are living in this semi-public space, almost.
Yeah. Of course, that's a little bit of the artwork, isn't it? To challenge that convention, right? To suggest that where you live, of course, for many of us, and especially during the pandemic, was the place where we worked, right? So we have got used to the idea that our work is also at home, and of course, many artists with their studios, whether they like it or not, they have to work at home. Some people can't afford to rent a home and a studio.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's not unusual. So the lucky ones can do both. Some people need to do it because of their practice. Like if they're painters, you can't really sleep and live in the same room as you're painting in because of the fumes, right? Just for an obvious example. So most people like to do that somewhere else. So they can leave that space. Now, if your practice is social and so not material, of course there is something as a result of this social exchange and dialogue and practice of doing things together. But you need tools, you need equipment, you might need materials, but you can pack it away again after, right? So it means that the social space is the artwork. Arguably, the kitchen Laptarvo is the artwork. It just happens to overlap with the place where I live. And that challenge of the convention that you mentioned, that your home is private and separate from your work, is actually part of the artwork. To change that convention. Because of the work that I did in 2023, in 2024 I was struggling a lot to sustain my rent even, but one of the positive things that came out of that time is that the students of Taitekoulumaa came to visit me at the time when they were challenged as a small independent art school here in Finland, in Helsinki. And Taitekoulumaa is like an independent art school based on Suomalinna, but they have a exhibition space in Sornainen area of the city. They came to visit me with their director, so there was like almost 18, 20 people in this room. And we read out statements of support for the school, but I had done a remote talk about this space to them about 6 months before. But what was important to me in that situation and that sort of merging of my studio workspace and living space with their educational context and their studies was that if you can't afford to rent a studio, if you can't afford to have an exhibition, if you don't know where to do your practice, it is possible to make culture at home. And it is possible also to present it in that context. Whether it's mediated through live streaming, for example, poetry or spoken word or live readings or whatever, it's possible to make a screening at home. Nothing's stopping you. There has been people in the past making listening events, audio arts events in homes.
When I came to Finland, I think the first year or somewhere during that time, there was this living room exhibition event.
Absolutely.
People would have it like an exhibition in their living room.
Absolutely. It's a long-term historical art practice to make exhibits in your own home, because you cannot afford, or you don't have access to, the official galleries or the institutions which present art and culture. So like, actually that's a hack of your home.
Like hack.
Right?
Hashtag.
No, I mean, you are taking advantage of the institution of a home to make culture. And you're using the resources you have as a home, which is hopefully a bigger space than this, to exhibit your work. Because you can. And it's a grassroots strategy to survive in an expensive cultural scene.
And you also have the yard where...
Also, you can do things in the yard, of course. So I mean, it's a starting point also. I think the important thing is you just do something. And whether you have a gallery or a studio or some other space to present your work, there are things you can always do. It's just whether that suits your imagination of what you should be doing. And what I did is I moved what I should be doing as a cultural organizer, artist-organiser, cultural producer, is that I thought, okay, I make this easy for myself. Rather than make a huge effort trying to find lots of money to make some cultural events, I'm going to move it to the opposite end of the scale, which is I can do this almost for nothing, right? And with in-kind support, I can maybe have online radio streaming. With in-kind support or even peer support, I can host events at home. If someone gives me some money, maybe I can pay my bills better, or maybe I can even afford to invite people to have residencies, which I've done this year because of some generous peer funding. It is possible to do things without money. And I think that's a good example to share with young people and young artists or want to be artists, to show that you don't need money to be a culturally active person.
I always ask people how they manage to sustain their practice and where they get their money from, basically.
Yeah.
So this is a good point to just open up.
Okay, so like I've already said before that I've had support from unemployment money. Now it's not.
You mentioned the peer support.
Okay, so let me make a point about the unemployment money.
Sure.
And then I'll make a point about the peer funding. So unemployment money is a situation in Finland which is quite, up until recently at least, been quite generous to give you support when you paid enough taxes to get support when you don't have a job. Right? This is the rights we have as workers.
I mean, that is the case in many countries. It's just a bit more stable, has been in Finland.
Up until recently, now it's being challenged.
Yeah.
Up until recently, you could get unemployment money without too many questions because of the work profile you have. Like as a cultural worker, most unemployment service workers know that you get your work because of your contacts, your social network, and the connections you have, and that those jobs you cannot easily apply for anywhere. Right? So the work comes because of who you know. Right? And some of that is better paid than others, of course. But anyway, there's no jobs to apply for, or very few jobs to apply for, whether you're an immigrant or not, right? Of course, even harder for immigrants, because there's the language problem also. So I see that as a sort of basic income. I believe in basic income for artists and cultural workers. So I think that type of support, which I have earned through paying taxes, if I give back to the commons, like I put my documentations and my works, whatever they are, into online repositories which promote commons with Creative Commons license or other open licenses. So I'm not keeping my work private. I don't believe in copyright. So for me, as a social engaged artist who works with media and technology and uses online platforms, I share my work for free, right? So for me, this social welfare system that Finland has had is a fair exchange, right? Because I put my work in the commons. If I get support from the commons, as in taxpayers of Finland, I put back into the commons, right? Because I'm from the open source cultural mindset, not pro-copyright one. So that's one point to make. I have experimented over the years, especially with Pixelike Festival, experimented with alternative economics. I even made a seminar in the 2009 festival called Alternative Economy Cultures. And the keynote speakers were peer funded. It means we invited them from international locations, USA and Belgium, and their flights and their fees was covered by people giving small amounts of money. So it was in the days of crowdfunding. So I know you can do culture on this basis as well. You don't need one big chunk of money, you need lots of little chunks of money. And you can do the same thing. So with that experience behind me, I thought, okay, there are challenges with getting public cultural funds to a semi-public, some people might say, private address. I have not got any public funds for this purpose of doing anything in Kitchen Lab Tarvo. I did get a Corona grant to experiment with online radio and audio. I used it for equipment. But since then, and since 2020, I've had no personal funding. So it means that I've got associational funding, I got project funding, but not anything for me. Which is fine. I'm of a certain age where that's maybe going to happen. But the point is that because of making culture in a home venue, it's unlikely you're going to get public funding. Of course, I've tried for projects, but it's never happened. So I have focused more on the peer funding, which means using Patreon.com, a US, actually California-based company.
There was a European version of that.
There is.
Coffee dot.
Yeah, there's been many types of platforms like this. Patreon I use because it's quite common. Let's
people
be fair.
know most about that one,
Yeah.
I think.
It's Anglospheric, which means that in Finland it's not used so much. It's more used in UK and USA. It's changing because they have offered more tools and facilities for their subscription fee, basically. The problem it has maybe is that you have to be you have to make an account, right, to give money to people. So you're somehow committing into that system. But anyway, I have used this. And over the few years, I started in 2020. I paused for a year or two, I think in 21, 22, and I started again in 2023. So over the years, I've had a fluctuating income from this. It's not a big income. So it's been a small income from maybe 40 to 80 euros a month, which has allowed me to pay my bills. Not my rent, but my bills.
Obviously.
Right? To know electricity and maybe your waste management bills, maybe your internet bill. This would be quite reasonable type of support to just help keep it along, right? There has been times where I have been commissioned to write article, or I did a presentation once for a university and I got paid via Patreon. I've had some supporters, most of them are friends, by the way, who have given more money because they really like what I do here. And on some occasions I have got quite a lot of money from one or two persons. Quite a lot accumulatively. I'm not saying a lot in like each bunch of monthly amounts, but accumulatively quite enough. because they appreciate what I've been doing here, and they are the regular guests. Of course, it's a challenge because despite people being used to paying for subscriptions to online services, there's few people who are used to paying subscriptions for event-based experiences. So you have to be a little bit creative about how this works and try to think, does it work or not? So one example that I have had based on my fermenting past has been having a kimchi or ferment hotel. So I have offered to make or show how to make ferments such as kimchi, and then I hosted for them until they wanted. So the smelly part is here. The result is to them.
Kimchi hotel sounds
right.
Yeah.
So that's worked. So I have one friend who subscribes to that support level in Patreon, and every time I meet them, I give a jar of kimchi, right?
You know, there was this Finnish service like Mecenati.
Yes, I know.
Thing. I don't know what's the state of it at the moment, but
well, that the thing about those ones is they're goal based. So that means you have a project which you want to get funding, and then
it's not like
you accumulate
thing generally.
Of course, there are other ones now. Mecenati started as a goal-based one, as a local alternative to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So like there has been many models to ask your friends or your peers or the people who think what you're doing is worth it to give some money. Finding the right one is a hard question. And then in the end, how do you deal with it actually legally? So in the end, I have reported my incomes from Patreon via the the Vero tax return update. So I gained this income through Patreon as extra income, and it gets adjusted into my annual tax.
Well, yeah.
So that's the way to deal with it, right? And you know, it's a strategy. It's an approach.
No, you're probably the first artist I'm talking with who is actually using this type of a system. So it's interesting too.
But that's because I will not get public funds to do something in my bedsit. Let's just use this term to emphasize it, right? So it's like you have to come up with alternatives. And I have tried different projects to try to get public funds. For example, projects which deal with Laajalahti Bay area, not in my house, but Laajalahti, the nearby sea bay. Or to think about how you might work with home libraries instead. So home libraries going somewhere else from here, etc. But it's not worked, and I keep coming up with new strategies. But this year, one person supported me. I don't know. Let's say about 600 euros over the year, and it allowed me to have summer residents who don't pay. In fact, in one case, I even gave money to help them come here, so they could have a short residence in Helsinki, on the basis of that support. You know? So again, you can make culture happen, and you can support small, modest level cultural exchange on resources that come from grassroots up. We are so used to, in Finland, having this top-down funding, you know, and the competition of applying for funding, right? And it concerns me, living here for now over 20, or having address here over 20 years, and so being familiar with the local scene, that the traditions of participatory, self-organized or grassroots-made culture is being slowly eroded, because we are all getting used to the idea either of having a cultural foundation grant give us money from top down, or even juries from Taike giving us money top down, and I'm sorry to say, some people will not even do their arts practice unless they get a grant. because the project is complicated, or it involves a lot of media production, or it's expensive to do this thing there. And that means that we start to restrict ourselves as creative people because of the systems that we are benefiting from. If you don't have those resources, what are you going to do? Are you going to just stop? And that's the challenge I want to make here. Like, you can still do stuff, but you have to swap the logic of how it gets supported to the other way around. So that you start from what you've got.
Yeah.
What do I have? What can I do culture with? What materials do I have in abundance? What resources do I have? What is it that allows me to do something? And from that basis, you make your art practice. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's actually a sort of very contextual starting point. And of course, like, you might say that social engaged arts and community arts practice, all these things are all about context. Working with people, it's all about context. You cannot do anything with someone else without understanding where they are coming from. So that is what adds in to what you do. And if you want to do something in a particular place, you have to think, what's appropriate to do in this place? If you want to work with a particular group of people or a particular institution, it's like, well, what can I do with this situation or this moment? And from that basis, you make your culture. And that's for me also applied here. So what do I have here? Okay, I have this room, 20 square meters. I have this door which goes to the public space. I have a toilet. I have a kitchen. I have a wall of books. Okay, I have some media resources. What can I do with this? So that's where I'm at, right? And that's where I hope Kitchen Lab Tarvo is a good example.
Yeah, and now in the end of the summer, you had a pretty large event in the yard.
Correct. I mean, that was made on the tradition of several years of making something called Tarvo Taidepäivät, Tarvo Art Days, which is done with my housemates in this villa. And when I moved into this villa in 2019, I attended the third one of these events. Right? So I inherited this tradition, and so do my housemates inherit this tradition of making some art days on Tarvo Island. Luckily, this year we had also the company and collaboration with the other adults in the other villa as well. So all 14 of us were making this event. And what I made on that occasion was a Friday day program, and they made a Saturday program. The Friday program was public, the Saturday program was private. And because of what I've tried to do with Kitchen Lab Tarvo here and the publicization of what happens here through social media, it's not been postered anywhere. My activity here locally as this kitchen lab, it's complicated how to engage with the locals, how to engage with Munkinniemi or Ruokinranta, the other sort of neighborhood on the other side, or Laajalahti neighborhood, because people look at these villas here as private. They are private, right? So how do you do something semi-public in a place which is perceived as private? It's complicated, right? And I have to negotiate with my housemates, with my neighbors. Not always successfully have I managed to do this well. How to advertise and invite people to come here. Because it's their home as well, right? And they're not choosing to make it public. It's me who's doing that.
Yeah.
So it's a sensitive matter over the years. Like I say, sometimes it's not.
It looks like you managed to
Yes,
some balance.
yes, of course. After some failures, obviously, doing things not so well, right? Learning some lessons, and so you try to do it better. Luckily, at the moment in this house, in this villa, and almost everybody in the house has some sort of creative practice, or they're researching something which is an arts form. So there is not. Whereas in some occasions in previous years, there are people in the house who have no creative practice. They do a different type of job. What's always interesting is the people who come to the door, who challenge maybe they are foreigners actually, who challenge the sense of local behaviors and decide to go, what's going on here? I see the sign, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a bit of a...
Yeah, I mean, I have...
People have a bit of this.
Yeah, because you know, they can read, oh, that's a kitchen lab, what the hell is that? And then I even have a sentence that says, this is not a cafe or a restaurant. And I tried to explain that it's actually some sort of cultural space and, you know, it's some sort of lab. Well, actually, it's even referred to as a Hacteria node, whatever that is. I mean, Hacteria is a international network of people interested in bioarts, hacking, and hacker culture and stuff. So I mean, people read the description, and the majority of people read the description and they go, and then they walk away, right? The few people come to the door and say, "I've read your sign, and I'm still curious. What is this?" And on a few...
Is this on purpose? How you
no
the sign?
No, it could be better for sure. It could be better. The point is, I don't want people coming here thinking they're going to get a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Or they can buy pulla, right? I don't need this, right?
Would be good for your rent, though, probably.
But then you have to start to have a food license.
Yeah, that
you have to have a health and safety license. Sorry. You need to create standards, which is quite hard to maintain in your own home. How do you deal with money?
Yeah.
So actually you get into other troubles. If you're not actually running a cafe, or a kiosk, which has certain rules and regulations, then why create this trouble for yourself? Just basic guest hospitality is enough. If you want to support what happens here, then you can give something in exchange. If you do it through Patreon or something, then I can at least process it appropriately. But like
I can put your Patreon link.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
So
I mean there is this sort of things you can do and things you can't do, and like of course there's lots of great grassroots initiatives in Helsinki which explore the kioski model, or the Ravintola Päivät, the restaurant days was a fantastic program, which could boost things that happen here. But those waves have came and gone over the years.
Yeah, I don't think they do it anymore.
They don't do it anymore. So I mean, the point is that there is waves for these things. There's a current interest of the last few years of online radio, which is great. It means cultural events don't need to have people turning up to them. You just need people tuning in and interested, right? And especially discussion events. So this type of thing, or this type of activity here, tries to work with those possibilities, those trends, so that people know what to expect a little bit. And the ones who come curiously to the door, then of course it's up to you if you feel like you want to engage with them or not. Most often I try to. On one occasion, I remember a few years ago, it was like in springtime. A couple of people came to the door. I started talking to them for like 15 minutes. I had a friend come here already who was making food. And I said, "Hey, do you want to just come in and have lunch?" And they did. It was so fun, right?
Yeah.
Because then you create something out of that, not only for yourself, like having lunch together with two strangers in your home. You create something for them which is probably unforgettable.
Probably.
Right? Because out of their curiosity, they crossed the line through your invitation in, which creates an experience which is not what normally happens. In some cultures, anyone who comes to your door is welcomed in with the hospitality, right?
Well, it's not the case here.
Not the case in Finland, right?
Yeah.
Some cultures are famous for this, especially Middle Eastern ones, right? But anyway, hospitality is one of the few things we can do for free almost, right? And some cultures have it as a default, and there's not a big effort to do it yourself. If you already have a teapot, some cups, some teas, most cultures who have this as a default have a separate room for that. Most often there's a front room where you are the hospitable host.
Yeah, in the UK it's called like sitting room or
Maybe, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, but in Middle Eastern cultures and Romani cultures, for example, there is a public part of your house. And then there's a private part of your house which is separate. Like a separate room where you sleep, for example. Right? So you're always welcome people to come in the public part of your house. Right? Musicians, artists, reader, poets, any guests. Come and make culture in the public part of your house. So, I mean...
If you have a house.
If you have a house. But, you know, there's some... Romani culture has houses as well.
Of course.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so I have seen it in Istanbul, for example. Sulukale was a famous neighborhood. Your LED lamp went out.
The lights.
Was famous neighborhood where Romani lived for 1,000 years. And many of the houses, it was famous for its musicians and its entertainment. And many of the houses in this neighborhood of Istanbul had a front room where culture happened. So this is the inspiration. Also, the point is we just have to do it in 20 square meters. You know?
I mean, you have been doing it, so it could be done.
It can be done.
Totally. Oh my God, Andrew! Like, you threw completely my my plan for how the podcast goes out of the window.
Oh, really?
This is the first time I'm not even asking you questions. You're just answering some of my questions without me asking them. It's just like, sure, let's just do it. Okay.
Okay, but you might have some questions.
No. It's okay. I mean, it's an interesting change. No, but one thing I will have to.
I can talk. I can talk. Obviously, I can.
For sure.
Off the top of my head.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. It's easier for me in that case.
Go on.
It's just because I gather this list.
Yeah.
So I'm asking everybody to give me names of other artists that are somewhat inspiring for you, or that you like their practice, follow their practice. So in this case, it could be like a social practice also.
Sure.
If there are people like that for you.
One of the most inspiring persons I have met over the years in Chicago. Actually, there's two people in Chicago I could highlight. One of them is a person called Nancy Clem. And Nancy is a landscape gardener by profession, but got into the artist world and the social engaged art world through the interest in appropriate technologies like solar cooking, which I witnessed a workshop by Nancy in this, composting, bioremediation, the remaking of healthy land out of toxic land, foraging, wild foraging of plants and fruits in the city. So I met Nancy in 2007 and was lucky to be able to invite Nancy to come to Finland, to Tampere in 2012. My own interest in composting comes from inspiration of Nancy. So I also do composting here with worm composting. Another person I could mention also from Chicago, I said Laura Schaefer. Laura I met also that same trip to Chicago. Also came to Helsinki that same year, and I hope to invite her back next year as a guest of Kitchen Lab Darvel. And actually, I think it's almost confirmed she will come next June, and even if I cannot raise the money, she will pay to come. That much she wants to come back to Finland. Laura has been transforming empty spaces in Chicago especially in Hyde Park, but then later Oak Park, which turns the emptiness of former shops and other types of buildings into social community cultural centres. And the effort of this has often blurred with her family life. When I first met her, she was making a home gallery, actually, exhibiting other artists' work in her home, in her family home. And then later she has included her family as a core part of our cultural social centres. These are two people who have given me inspiration all that time since, and relate very closely to what's happening here. So I give these two examples. There are so many more, but
yeah, of course. I mean,
I don't know who else to give, but these two are important to this place.
Yeah, I will write them down, and they are on the website of the podcast. All of the names.
Oh, okay.
Check what other people.
You had some other questions, all right?
Well, I usually ask people if they go to exhibitions and such, but like, you go to other events similar to what you're doing.
I suppose I don't go to exhibitions very often, to be fair.
No, not necessarily exhibitions, but something that is interesting to you in this context.
Okay, I went. The most recent thing I went to was actually an exhibit, but it was in the library of the workers' movement, which is in Sorninen area. It was an exhibit by Mina Henriksson and Sesgen Boynik, and basically they had asked to see the collection of, I think they were uncategorized books in the collection of this workers' library, and they picked out a selection of books which related to anti-fascist movements in Finland, and made little vitrine boxes which showed examples of books and contextualized them with historical text or a description of what was there and its wider position within the workers' movement or within that particular period in Finnish history. They had made very nice screen printed, or maybe they're risographed posters, and then they had these vitrines with the books they'd selected out of this uncategorized collection. There's also a few events connected to this exhibit. So this is an example of a type of exhibition I like to go and see. And
Sure.
if I think about what is something otherwise, well, occasionally I go to see things that happen in Mumalakaks. I try to catch a few festivals as they come and go. But living on this side of the city and in this location in particular, it's quite easy to stay here. And if I go out and about, I try to catch a few things at the same time. Yeah. But no, I go to galleries or even less museums, maybe once a month. I'm sort of living a bit out of the contemporary art world, as I've mentioned.
Yeah, well, it's a different, a little different.
I think the thing I should say is that, like, when it comes to making art, I mentioned anyway what's appropriate and what's worth doing. When you do social work, then a lot of your work actually is in creating contexts, which often can be events or cultural production, which works towards, for example, a festival or an associational event, and that means a lot of the effort is in attending events rather than going to exhibitions. You know, so that sort of understanding of what's going on often is attending events. Yes, something else you would like to know?
I don't know anymore. Maybe I got
okay.
What I wanted, but you mentioned you wanted to do.
I could say something, that there's a little bit of text I want to read, because when I have this effort of trying to communicate what happens here, what this place is, what does it try to do, and I try to communicate this in public, then of course it's complicated, it's difficult maybe even, and it's not obvious what it is. And earlier in springtime, I hosted a screening event of films curated by a Belarusian film festival director or organizer. And because of this context, a few people, especially in the local Belarusian scene, were saying, can you please explain what the values of your place? Like, what values do you have? Actually, how does it fit with our politic, basically, right? And I thought, oh, that's a good question. Especially when you start to do things that relate to activism, the activists often want to know, what do you stand for? What are your values?
I guess that's the basis of activism.
Isn't it? But most artists don't do that, right? Not, of course, people who are interested in activist topics and art, they often do position themselves. But when it comes to a space, it's interesting. What do you write? Right? So, okay. So I had to write something this spring, so I want to read it anyway as a statement of this. So I think, and I now paraphrase it because it's a list of things. I think that I'm involved in Finnish multicultural work. I think I have a Scottish-style hospitality, where the values include feminist and queer futures, anti-fascist, anti-racist, counter-authoritarian or oppression perspective. I think I value things like autonomy and ecosystem sustainability, green economics and degrowth. I hope to have some sort of poly-crisis awareness. I believe in climate emergency, a sort of solastalgia, where you're missing already, you feel like you're losing your environment as you're living in it. I'm interested, as I mentioned, in grassroots cultural heritage, in peer-to-peer or peer-based commons orientation. And I like to think that I am towards sharing voice, reading aloud. Here I am, reading aloud. Conversation, cooking together, and hybrid arts.
Thank you.
Thank you.